Hello, talented 8th graders. Today we're starting Module 4, Describing and Classifying Organisms. Let's get into it. Our learning objectives for today is the students will identify the 6 kingdoms, the students will give examples for each of the 6 kingdoms, and finally the students will describe features of each of the kingdoms. Our essential question for today is what kind of characteristics are common in each kingdom of life? So here is our essential vocabulary for today. Our organism is an individual living thing, which can be unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular organisms are those that are made up of one cell that carries out all of the life processes. Multicellular organisms are made up of many cells that work together. Autotrophs are organisms that make their own food, so usually using sunlight, such as photosynthesis or chemical processes. Heterotrophs depend on other organisms to get their energy, so they need to eat. They cannot make their own food. Cell is the smallest unit of life that carry out all life processes. And finally, DNA is our genetic material that carries instructions for an organism's traits and characteristics. Here are 6 characteristics of living things. So for something to be considered a living thing, it must contain all 6 of these characteristics. It must be made up of cells. It must be able to use matter and energy. So it's getting that energy from sunlight and it's converting that into ATP or food, or it's getting that energy through eating other organisms. It should be able to grow and change. It must have DNA or some sort of genetic material. It should be able to reproduce, and this could be asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction. And finally, it should be able to, those living organisms should be able to respond to their environment, so external stimulus and so on. So let's talk about prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells first. Our prokaryotic cells are unicellular organisms. They do not have a nucleus inside their cell. So nucleus is usually defined, or an analogy would be, it's kind of like the control center or the brain of the cell. So prokaryotic organisms are simple organisms, and they do not have a nucleus. DNA looks like a, inside a eukaryotic organism, DNA looks like a twisted rubber band. They do not have any membrane-covered organelles, and they have a cell wall outside of the cell membrane. Examples of these would be bacteria. Our eukaryotic cells are those more complex organisms. They are larger, like the cell itself is larger than the prokaryotic cells. They do have a nucleus, which makes it more complex. They have membrane-bound organelles, and only some organisms have a cell wall here, such as the plants or the plant cells that have a cell wall. A cell wall makes the structure of the cell more rigid versus something that does not have a cell wall. It's going to be more flexible. So let's take a mindful minute. I want you to choose this. Whoops. Let me get my pen on. I want you to choose this emoji for prokaryotes and this emoji for eukaryotes. So pause the video, answer these 4: bacteria, plant cell, no nucleus, and animal cell. And when you're ready to discuss, come back. All right, so prokaryotic cells, we said these are more simpler organisms. They don't have a nucleus. So all types of bacteria are going to be your prokaryotic organisms. Remember, prokaryotic organisms versus eukaryotic is the prokaryotic that does not have a nucleus. That is why they're simpler. A plant cell is going to be eukaryotic. Plants are more complex organisms, which is why they are eukaryotic. And animal cells, of course, are also eukaryotic. So animal cells make more complex organisms, like all of our animals, and even we have animal cells in our body. Let's move on. So now let's finally talk about the six kingdoms. So we have a domain system, and those domains are further categorized into our six kingdoms that we know of. So we have domain bacteria that has the kingdom bacteria underneath it. We have domain archaea that has the kingdom archaea underneath it. And then we have domain eukarya that has four different kingdoms underneath it, which is Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Animalia. So let's talk about each one of them. There are many different types of organisms, millions and millions of them, and which is why we need these kingdoms, right? Scientists group these things to make it easier to study and to research them. And so all of the living things are going to belong to one of these six kingdoms. So the six kingdoms, like we just mentioned, are eubacteria, archaebacteria. So eubacteria lies under the bacteria domain, then archaebacteria lies under the archaea domain, and then number 3 through 6, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia, lie under the eukarya domain. So let's go into more detail for eubacteria. Eubacteria kingdom, they are unicellular and they are prokaryotic. Remember, we said all types of bacteria are going to be prokaryotic. They can be autotrophic, meaning they can make their own food, converting sunlight into energy, or they can be heterotrophic, and they can eat other organisms to get their energy. They are found almost everywhere, right? On your hands, inside your stomach, on your table. They are almost everywhere, and some are very helpful. In fact, most of them are helpful, and some of them are harmful and can cause you to get sick and get different diseases. Then we have archaebacteria that is also unicellular. They are also prokaryotic. One difference between eubacteria and archaebacteria is that archaebacteria is able to live in extreme conditions. So think volcano vents, extremely salty water, chemical-filled places, bottom of the ocean, hot springs, those type of areas where normal things are usually not able to survive. Archaebacteria can be autotrophic, so they usually use chemicals to get their energy. Sometimes heterotrophic, and they do also have a unique cell chemistry, which is why they're able to survive in these extreme environments. So that's what makes them different from our eubacteria kingdom. Now let's get into our domain eukarya. The first one we're going to talk about is kingdom Protista. These are eukaryotic. They can be unicellular or multicellular. Some Protista have chloroplast. Chloroplast is what is needed to give plants their color, or the chlorophyll inside it is what gives them their color. And so these organisms would be able to get their color from that. And they move using cilia. Cilia is these tiny hair-like things that you see in these organisms. So, and this is your flagellum right here, this tail-like thing. So Protista acquire or obtain nutrients by photosynthesis or by ingesting other organisms. So that is why they are autotrophic and heterotrophic. Then we have our kingdom fungi. Fungi are eukaryotic. They're usually multicellular. Most of them are multicellular. Usually anything that you'll be able to see is going to be multicellular. If something is unicellular, you need a very strong microscope to be able to see them. You do not see unicellular organisms with your naked eye. So there are some types of fungi that are unicellular. Their cells have cell walls made out of a substance called chitin, but their cells do not have chloroplast like the plant cells have. Fungi store food as glycogen. Now let's get into our Plantae kingdom. These are going to be eukaryotic, and these are also going to be multicellular. Their cells do have a cell wall. It's made up of cellulose. They use light to produce food by photosynthesis, and they store their food as starch. And then finally, we have our Animalia, which is what our cells are made up of. Animalia are eukaryotic multicellular organisms. Their cells have a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles, but they do not have a cell wall. They are heterotrophic, so we do need to eat to get our energy, and our food is stored as glycogen. What are some common misconceptions about these kingdoms? So the first one states all members of a kingdom are very similar. So what that means is most people think everything in the fungi kingdom, for example, is going to look similar. It's going to act similar. And actually, there are many millions of organisms, right, that are in each category. And so each kingdom is actually very, very diverse. They have wide differences, whether it's in their structure, their diet, where they live, and so on. Misconception number two is that fungi are a type of plant. So actually, plants undergo photosynthesis. We know that, right? Fungi do not, which is why they're not under that plant category. Fungi are heterotrophic, they absorb nutrients. Kind of characteristics are common in each kingdom of life. So I have some sentence stems for you, and I also listed each of the kingdoms for you, so you do not have to go back in your work. And once you are done and you are ready to discuss, you can come back. All right, so for each of the kingdom, you should have told me something about them being unicellular or multicellular, whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, whether they are autotrophic and or heterotrophic, because those are the main components that differentiate between these kingdoms. So the first one we're going to talk about is archaebacteria. Archaebacteria, we said, are unicellular. We said they are prokaryotic, and then they can be autotrophic or they can be heterotrophic. The main thing we know about archaebacteria is that they live in extreme environments. Second comes our eubacteria. Eubacteria are unicellular. They are prokaryotic, but again, just like archaebacteria, they can be autotrophic or heterotrophic. They are found everywhere, all around you, many environments, and they can be helpful or they can be harmful. Number three is protista. So protista are mostly unicellular, meaning there are some organisms in this kingdom that are multicellular, but most of them are unicellular. They are eukaryotic, and they can be both autotrophic or heterotrophic. They move using cilia, those hair-like things, or a flagella, that tail-like thing, or pseudopodia. Fungi is our mostly multicellular group. There are very few unicellular fungi. They are eukaryotic and they are heterotrophic. They do need to eat to get their energy. They actually absorb nutrients from other organisms. Number five is our plantae kingdom. Plantae are multicellular organisms. They're eukaryotic and they are autotrophic. They're able to make their own food, and they do that via the process of photosynthesis. Also, this autotrophic can also happen via chemical processes. So that leaves us with kingdom Animalia, which is multicellular. It's eukaryotic and it's heterotrophic. We do need to eat to get our energy. They get their energy by consuming other organisms. If you got all of that correct, my gosh, you did amazing. I am proud of you, and I will see you guys next time.